I had a client that it was a lot of convincing to do 6 cashews and
Mhm.
then steps up to to residential in 2 weeks is eating a bag of trail mix.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Or there's taking a picture of them
incredible.
eating a hamburger. Welcome to the RD Roadmap, Journey to Eating Disorder Expertise. This is episode 11, what I will call the 14ers, understanding higher levels of care and beyond. My name is Jill Sakey, registered dietitian.
My name is Mateus Milhomes, registered dietitian.
Thanks so much for joining today. Well, I thought we would talk about the 14ers. And, I got exposed to the 14ers living in Colorado and now understand a little bit more about them. So 14ers, if you aren't familiar with them, are the mountains, at least in, I'm sure they're throughout the United States, but at least in Colorado that are, 14,000 or more feet up, and that people like to feel accomplished hiking to the top to manage the elevation changes, the challenges of getting up there, et cetera. So sometimes it's not the pathway up that is as challenging, but it's the like change in elevation where you can't get enough oxygen and all those various things. So, but people love, you can find maps around town that have a picture that you can put pins or stickers of which 14er you climbed up. Some 14ers are pretty are the easy ones, and then other ones are a little bit more challenging to get up. I was on a hike probably a few weeks ago, and I bumped into, we happened to be letting this woman pass, and somehow we began to talk to her, and she happened to be one of these very accomplished hikers, and she was talking about the 14ers she loves to hike. And so she talked about one of them, I can't remember the name of it, but she said it was called the razor's edge, that you have to get across to get to this other side. I'm like, what does that mean? Well, she's like, well, this year 6 people have died falling off. And I'm like, that is not a 14er I'm going to go up in having to kind of get through this razor's edge. So I guess you have to hug the mountain as you're kind of sneaking
Ooh.
through, which is like straight down to your death. So anyway, why are we talking about these 14ers? Is I feel like higher level of care is a little bit like that, is like some, they're like hiking these 14ers, understanding them and what level, what they look like and what to understand about them as a professional working in the field. And so I thought today we could talk about, at least in this section of our podcast, what it's been like for you, having never worked in that level of care. I can reflect a little bit about what it's been like for me working that level of care and outpatient, and how it influences what I do outpatient and kind of my knowledge base. So I thought we could kind of reflect on that. On the back end, we're going to talk about like a little bit more in depth of the different levels of care. And I don't want it to feel basic to you, even if you've been in the field for 5 or 10 years. I'm hoping you're going to get something out of even the back end. But a little bit more in depth about what are the different levels of care, when do you refer to them, what to expect, how to blend the different two, and how things can be a challenge for clients with eating disorders if they don't go step down, as we call it. So we'll kind of use some of the lingo and language to be aware of if you're not familiar with it. But I hope too, for those that have been in the field for a while, perhaps that they feel validated of some of the challenges and issues that kind of come about with the levels of care depending on where you work. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about today, a little bit. Yeah. So what, in terms of when we say higher level of care, there's levels of care, meaning outpatient is the bottom where someone may start. The top level of care, or the most challenging 14, or let's just say, is the inpatient level of care, which, kind of is more medical stability. Before we, and before we go into that a little further, the series is we're going to invite some guest speakers coming in that have been in the level of care for quite some time. So very accomplished, experienced individuals that have been an inpatient, residential, and then PHP and IOP. And I think we're going to try to find someone as well that has been in maybe a level of care as someone newer, and what their experience has been like compared to those that have been in the field for quite some time too. So that's kind of our little series now that we've gotten off the medical series. So this is the 14er series and understanding higher levels of care. So, Mateus, I'll let you kind of like say some initial thoughts or reactions to where we're going, and we can kind of dig into other things today.
This was this is something that was actually very confusing. I I didn't find out that the levels of care existed for eating disorders until I was in my master's, and I had a course on eating disorders, and it had me learn about the SEDS. It had me. I watched a movie called Thin. It's
Mhm.
like a documentary in a residential facility. Um, and that was the first time that I learned that it actually existed, because it's not something that you hear about often. And even in training as a dietitian. So it was something that I was first exposed in my master's, and then when I started working in the field, it was still a little elusive, like what they do there, like how long people stay, what the process kind of looks like, and I've been kind of learning about it vicariously
Mhm.
because of coordination. I have to coordinate with clinicians that are in that level of care very, very frequently. So I've been learning little by little um, about their experiences, the things that they were doing. It's interesting, but it was also very scary. I remember when I first started training with you, and you would tell me that I have to coordinate with someone, and I would be sick to my stomach and panic, like, oh my gosh, I have to call a doctor.
Like
I
feeling
have to
like you
call
don't
this
know what you're
person.
saying, and then like you've been in clinical already, so it's not that you haven't worked with professionals and other people, but it's like you probably had more confidence in the work you were doing. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
but the work was this work was new,
Yeah, yeah.
If I called people to talk about coordinate, pediatrics and prenatal care and all those things, and I felt very comfortable. But in this field, I was like, they're gonna call me stupid for asking for suggesting this or that,
Mhm.
um, which has not been the experience at all. People have been very kind and very into it. It's something that I actually do appreciate about the field. I think that there's an understanding, at least with the people that I've coordinated and worked with, that you can't. It's not productive to be isolated.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been interesting, and I'm very excited and curious to learn more about the people that we're going to be interviewing and hearing the experiences, what a day in their life kind of looks like. So yeah, I'm very excited about the topic.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting to kind of hear your experience from starting only an outpatient first, but having not being a new dietitian. You had already been a dietitian in Brazil for multiple years, and very versed and comfortable in those and the coordination piece. So I think it's important to kind of recognize, like you said, to me, like eating disorders is almost like you're getting another master's degree. You have to learn the lingo and kind of what's expected in the treatment. But what I find is like when you're coming in as a brand new dietitian, sometimes I always encourage like try to do clinical for a year or 2 years and kind of get some basics there to feel more confident in some of that work in that area, getting comfortable talking and working with others, so that when if you decide to want to open your own private practice or something like that, or begin to first work in higher level of care, it's not so intimidating and challenging. So even if it was hard for you, I feel like you probably had some background already that allowed you to kind of advance pretty quickly. It's always anxiety provoking to kind of not know everything and then coordinate, but then you had already been in that position already. And to me, that showed, because I've trained a lot of new dietitians that came right out of the residency, and that situation was probably a lot different, compared to
Hmm.
kind of some of the work you've done. So, but it's helpful looking at that. When I started working, I was in Houston, Texas, and they had no residential facilities in Houston, Texas, none, and no PHP IOP programs. They were trying to start one in this one small little drug and alcohol. It's not it's a really good program, but it was very small. Like they were trying to get some kind of IOP started because we found that there was very much a need. but they had no programs. Now I think they're like five, two
Yeah.
residential, three residential, multiple PHP, multiple IOP programs that are in Houston. And so I didn't even, I was sending people to residential only. I wasn't, we had no PHP IOP. So we tried our best to kind of manage things, but I was always out of state. And so, I got to go visit, like they did a lot of like on-site visiting. So the first couple years I started in the field, I would, I think I visited 5 to 8 residential facilities, from Laureate to Center for Change to, Eating Recovery Center. And so that's how I kind of like got to see some concept of like, so you would get to go during their family week. So sometimes you would see like the presentations given to like they would have presentations by the leaders of those different facilities, but they would kind of already be doing all of that at the same time that they had the family week for the clients. We wouldn't see the clients necessarily, but everything was kind of coordinated with that time. So they don't do that anymore. Now they have like virtual tours, or maybe a few of them allow you to come and visit a little bit. But that's kind of how I got exposed to the residential level of care. But what happened to me was like the first program in Houston called Houston Eating Disorder Center was started by a colleague of mine, Dr. Teresa Fasihi. And so she and Dr. Bermudez, Vidya Bermudez, who was used to be one of the owners of Eating Recovery Center in Denver, they decided to create a partial IOP program. And so that I was invited into that program to kind of start going with another colleague of mine, Brandy Powell. And so we kind of began to develop this program and obviously coordinating together. So I was kind of like from the ground up developing something and learning in that type of program. So anyway, but now of course there's multiple facilities and things. So that was my exposure to all of this, and I feel like a lot of this was learning by fire. Just don't step on this, avoid this area, those types of things, where now I feel like there's a lot more consistency happening. Like programs tend to be working the same, they have the same profiles, and they figure things out. And so those that go in new to the field, maybe they're first starting in a PHP IOP program, it feels more comfortable and grounding versus when I started, when I was like, what are we doing in this program? Because there's nothing here in Houston that's available. So that was my experience a little bit. So I'm, grateful that those that, I think you can get some really good solid training in these higher levels of care, even if you're first starting off. Because I remember applying to one and they wouldn't even accept me because I didn't have 5 years experience. But now it's like they'll take people in higher levels of care right out of college, essentially.
And I'm particularly curious about that experience because I feel like there's a lot of training and a lot of I'm curious to see what would that be like, because just think about it. I'm here terrified to coordinate with a therapist or a doctor because I'm scared of being perceived as stupid. They are working with therapists and with doctors. They do probably if it was I had some experience at the inpatient program with Texas Children that they would do rounds together, so you get a little bit of everybody's input,
Mhm.
so whereas here, if we are not trying to connect, we are kind of alone in the outpatient,
Mhm. Mhm.
and having to hold space and figure out a lot of things by ourselves, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
No, for
I
sure.
got lots of support, but I think that I'm the exception.
Well, it's so different now. Again, this is why I even did a residency and had you with intensive training outpatient, because I'd never had it. Like, again, I started in Houston as a eating disorder dietitian. I think there was 3 or 4 outpatient dietitians in Houston. 4. I don't know how many there are now. There's more than you can imagine. I mean, things have shifted and changed over the last 15 years where, I'm not saying it's a dime a dozen, but I mean, essentially there's plenty of outpatient providers as dietitians that you can find, and also therapists. So I didn't have any training. I was really trying to learn on my own. And so that's why I developed the residency, to kind of have some kind of structure, and I really feel like it was helpful for many that have been through it. We don't have to go into depth with it here, but I feel like that was meant to help you feel more comfortable on this level of care without having experience in the field. But I don't know what it is like in higher level of care if you have no experience, because some people, now I think a lot of people go right out of college into like a residential treatment center, which I think is, in terms of working, but I think they probably have a lot more training now. And so I'm curious to see too what people say, how that feels like to them, if they also feel they don't have much support, or it feels really comforting and supportive, so that they learn really, really quickly in a couple of years, versus feeling like I felt like it took me 5 or 10 years to feel more comfortable in this field of outpatient. I was like doing out residential or higher level care and outpatient, going, what am I doing? so anyway, but I mean, it's really cool to see how it's evolved. And then, from your experience, being able to pop in and, have some good training, and then also be successful as an outpatient dietitian too. So, okay. So we have some interviews. I'm not sure if this series will be 3 or 4 or 4 to 6 different series on higher level of care. It's really meant to, of course, be for those that are new in the field and having some sense and guidance with it, but also for those that maybe have been in the field for a while. You're getting some validation, and kind of it's helpful for you to hear kind of what we have to say or talk about. And then hopefully you'll get some good information from those that we interview. When we interview, those are going to be part of the YouTube free channel. It's not going to be the back end. We might do some back end stuff on some of those, but we want those interviews to be accessible to anyone as well. So just kind of be prepared for that. But yeah, let's kind of head to the back end and talk more about different levels of care, what to expect from them, what they're for, when do you refer. We have so much to talk about and dig into. So we look forward to seeing you there. Join us soon.